I am pleased to be with Mr. Daniel today. He agreed to do this conversation with me. So, Mr. Daniel, can you tell me about yourself?
Well, my name is Daniel Francis. I am an author of the two books, The Millennial Mind and The Millennial Experience. One launched in 2019, one launched this year one launched in 2020, one launched in 2021. I'm also a success coach. I've been one for about 4 years. Majority of my clients, you guessed it, would have been millennials. So that's kind of how the book came about. And from the books, I actually open up a whole new section of what I do, whereby I guide authors to self-publish successfully or teach them different aspects of it, or even do some aspects of publishing for them. Because a lot of authors kept coming to me, with questions, and I really wanted to standardize it so that I could help more persons and make it a little bit easier to disperse the information. And I mean, outside of that, I feel like I'm just that type of person who likes to do things surrounded by millennials as well. So pre-COVID, I would have thrown events, I would have been a host for a show, all those kind of calmed down a little bit with COVID. But that's the gist of who I am. My purpose is really to help people get from point A to point B, whether that be through personal development, author coaching, events, just in any way that I can help them based on the experience and the tools that I have at my disposal.
All right, great. I just want to ask you about the writing process. Like, can you remember Daniel Francis before writing the book, during the book, and after the book? The process of writing, is that the same individual? How did writing impact your life? Writing a book impact your life? And after writing a book, publishing, and what comes with that, how did that redefine you? Or did it redefine you?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. Honestly, before the book, I was in a state of figuring things out a lot, but not regular figuring it out. It was more like, I had been a coach for a while. I bring value to my clients, but I just felt like there's more that I could have been doing, but I did not know how to do it. So literally months before I wrote the book, because I would have started writing the book in September, January, I said, I need to increase my value because as I am right now, I'm not enough. So I took out a mission to read one book a week, right? A hefty goal. And most of the books would have been self-help books. So fast forward to September when I got the idea, hey, write a book. I had inadvertently done a lot of the work to prepare. I had read the self-help books. I had 3 years of experience with coaching. I had my own particular experiences as a millennial, the ups and downs. So it really kind of fell in line, divine intervention for me to have what I needed to write this book. Of course, when I started, I didn't know what exactly I was getting myself into. I had an idea, but I had no idea. During writing, I felt like I was truly tested. I'm a coach. I teach on goal setting, habits. So I use those same techniques when I started writing. So my main thing was, Daniel, you're a morning person. Stick with that. You do your best creating in the morning. So every day for a month and a half, I would wake up 4, 5, because I had a lot of work to do around that time. I said, I'm going to dedicate an hour to 2 hours of writing. And you realize after doing a month and a half of that, you really started testing the confines of discipline, because there were days when I just didn't want to write. I felt like it was too difficult to get anything out. I found myself playing all kind of motivational music, trying all kind of tricks to get myself excited. At one point, my go-to was the theme song from Lion King. For some reason, that was getting me excited to write. And there's a lot of things that you wouldn't know that come from process of writing. You start to doubt yourself. You start to ask questions like, who am I to write these words? What do I know? Have I been doing this long enough to give this type of advice? Every single word I've written will be criticized. How will it be received? You really start to ask yourself, do I really want to do this?
Yeah. Do you question? Did you ever question the fact, like, what is your your educational achievement or your educational
Mhm.
attainment?
Yeah, because I have a degree. That's as far as I got, but my degree was in biology. So I actually wanted to be a whole doctor. So none of what I do right now, because I worked at the bank and I became an entrepreneur with the coaching, none of it really used the biology. But as an entrepreneur, I learned that there's conventional schooling, but then there's a different type of schooling on unconventional courses. You're learning from experience, you're learning from mentors, and I had a lot of that. So I was aware that there's different ways to see this, but then you never know. When doubt and fear come in, you start to question, what will people say? How will this be
Yeah, and
received?
that's one of the things that that affected me as well. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
I am a teacher, and then I have my degree, my associate's degree, and I'm
Right.
saying what I am writing about. It's not. I don't know how it will be received because of my educational attainment. That doesn't
Mm.
say that I don't read a lot. I read extensively. I
Right.
read a lot of different material. I read a lot of
Right.
stuff. And I'm saying, how will it come across? Because you putting doctor in front of your name would make your book a lot more valuable. You understand what I'm saying? Like it comes across like that. So did that affect your process? Did that lower your confidence in any way?
You know how many times I thought about it. Should I go back to school to get a PhD so I can put doctor in front of my name? Like how important is that? I've thought about that so many times, but I don't know. I'm very grateful for the experiences I've had in life. So the experience of coaching, the experiences of throwing events, because it showed me that a lot of what we think is just up here. When you get to the nitty gritty of real life, it's never really what we expect,
Sure.
right? It's really about what we make it. It's really about what we bring to the table, and it's really about how we express the results of our spoils, right? So because, and I'm sure you experience this as well, because it's something you've never done before. Just like anything you've never done before, it's unknown. So you don't know if what you're doing is the best, and you don't know how it will be received because this is a new experience. So I literally had to sit down and tell myself, hey, just this is what we're doing. We've already committed to this. It's happening.
Yeah.
So you need to learn what type of backbone you need to build to make this realistic.
Yeah.
And I remember the first thing I had to learn was when you produce a book, it's not going to be for everyone. It will be specific for the niche that you want, but everybody outside of that niche, they may not understand certain parts, they may not receive certain parts in a particular way. And so said, so done. I got really, really good reviews for some people. Some people within my target questioned a lot of things, which I really love. By the way, those conversations are always the best. People who like kind of go back and forth with your book. I don't know if you experienced that, but it's so much fun because you get to understand their background and they get to understand why you're writing this. And I had some people who just completely hated it, who were just outside of the target market. I'm like, that's fine, because it's unreasonable for me to think that I would write a book and every single
Every
person who
single
reads it
person. And
would love it. It's insane.
yeah, and your topic is the millennial experience and the millennial mind. That's two
Yeah,
wonderful topics. And like you said, it made writing the book allow you to build value. You build your value, the experience. So the person you will post the book before the book, the person you will
mm-hmm.
during the book, and the person you will after the book. That's three different individuals because you went down
Definitely.
you went down into a difficult journey. You took up you took up some form of responsibility of writing that book, and then you had to go through the difficulty of producing the best way that you can, and that will take time. Like you said,
Yeah.
that will take backbone, and that's not the same individual. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I admire as well in my journey is align trying to align what we know conceptually to what we
Yeah.
can embody. Like Carl Jung said, you have to crystallize your you have to crystallize your symbol. When you have a thought in your head, it's a symbol. But then when you take that symbol and you embody that symbol, you have to crystallize it. You have to bring it into
Completely
something
different.
physical.
And just on that point on crystallizing, I realized, and this is why I think everybody should write a book, even if you don't publish it and use it. The act of having to take from the words and the thoughts and ideas from your mind and crystallizing it, as you say, you just grow so much. Like I grew a lot as a coach and as an individual when I was forced to now challenge my own ideas, challenge my own experiences, and then say, okay, if these are my ideas and I have to make them real, what do I need to do to translate that? And the process of having to translate it made me grow exceedingly fast.
But what,
So I
but what,
always suggest.
but what growth? When you say it made you grow, I mean physically we grow, we we grow naturally. Physically, our
Yeah.
body grow naturally, but our mind is something that we have a personal responsibility for, and
Right.
and that's something in psychology that is called the Puritanist. It's called the man child, or they actually call it the 13, 40-year-olds. It's like naturally your body grows. You cannot stop that. If you don't have enough nutrients, you will be malnourished and your body will not grow properly. But naturally your body grows. But your mind is something that you must take personal responsibility for its growth. And that's where I'm agreeing with you when you said everybody should write a book, because writing teach you how to think and teach you how to take your thoughts and to make your thoughts coherent. It teaches you how to take in many variables into consideration, variables that you will not take on a day-to-day basis. But when you write it and you read over that thing, you might see, but that doesn't make sense. Something is missing. So then your mindset, the way that you interpret the world, the way that you look at one-track mind, the way that you condition, for lack of a better word, the way that you are domesticated changes, because you start to question how you are interpreting the world, the way the information comes in. Because when you write something, the writing process is such an interesting thing. When you write something and you go back and read it, either you're like, did I write that? The did I write that comes across as whether it is negative or positive. Like, is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Like, I can do better. And you can go out and fix that. And when you fix what you write, or when you fix your home, or when you fix your house, you're fixing something in your mind. And that's one of the things that we need to take into consideration as well. Don't be naive about somebody that is cleaning a house or somebody that is cleaning his or her yard, because you must come to the awareness that something is wrong with my home so that I could fix it. There are persons who are unable to see that things are wrong. That's why you might think like, okay, this house is not clean. Don't you think that the person might not even realize that the house is not clean? They interpret the structure it's just okay. Everything is just discombobulated and disorganized, and it's okay to them because the thought process is discombobulated as well. And that's one of the things that writing does. It makes you put your thoughts in coherent sequence. So
definitely.
Yeah, so moving forward, I mean, based on the title of your book, and I keep saying, I love the title of the book, The Millennial Experience and the Millennial Mindset. It appears that you appreciate the generation. You appreciate thinking about generation, because that's what the word millennial stands for. It's our generation. It's a generation of people. So can you speak to me about your findings on generation holistically? And then we're going to zone into the millennial and the generations before it and the generation after. So what's this generation? What did you gather?
Yeah. I mean, being a millennial, I live it, so I understand it quickly. But what I didn't realize was being a coach and you're listening to person's problems, you realize I just started to see a trend, right? Of course, when it comes to personal development and becoming a better person, we all have more or less the same core problems, right? We may not know what our purpose is. We procrastinate. We have instant gratification that expresses itself in lack of patience or short-term thinking and all these different core issues. But depending on what age period you're in, that might be expressed differently, and especially with your personality. So I might have one person coming who doesn't know their purpose, and that's causing X type of problems in their life. And then another person with same, not understanding their purpose, but then having Y problems. And for me, it was just noticing that, oh, there's a trend that's forming here. But then I'm realizing, especially when it comes to millennials, there are specific things that we are just always struggling with. And for me, it became clear that there's a combination of things. It's about how we were raised, it's about technology and how early we got access to it. And it's about even schooling, how it prepares us for the real world. And then when we get into the real world and it's something else, how that affects us mentally when you put that in combination with all the other things like technology, social media, jealousy, competitiveness, and you now get this amalgamation of emotions and life lessons that if you're not really prepared to do it, you could literally lose yourself in an instant. So it was just about seeing all these things happening to persons, also with myself and clients, and noticing that, oh, there's a trend. There's also something that's just very acute to us based on our upbringing. And I really wanted to write a book that when someone read it as a millennial, they'll say, this guy is in my head. I feel like this guy is following me on the streets. How does he know I'm going through these experiences? Or bursting the bubble, because I think a lot of us are sleepwalking. We are constantly distracted by things and not seeing the main issues in our life. And I think if the bubble isn't burst early enough, you will stay on this default path for too long, end up in your 40s and your 50s, really then awaken and then realize, wow, what is this life I'm living? How did I get here? And so that's kind of what I really wanted to push with the book and to say to my generation.
Oh, all right, great. And I did some work on, and like you said, I'm very interested in human development and human ingenuity. And
Right.
I've come across the concept of generation and throughout the span, how
Right.
a generation is measured, the time frame between the different generations. And like exactly as you're explaining, and that's correct. A lot of our environmental aspects, and there is a theorist called Yuri Yuri from Benter thereabout. His theory is that the ecological systems theory, and basically he's saying that the individual is surrounded by many categorizations or level of analysis or different functions. So you have the individual in the middle, and then you have the family, and you have what is attached to the individual's family, and then you have this wider society, and then you have the culture. And that's how I think of generation. I think of generation throughout time, how our environment changes, how what we knew back then, our systems are not evolved, for lack of a better word, to deal with the changing environment. Because
I agree more with that one.
we have the baby boomers. They had a specific environment. They had a
Right.
specific economic environment. They had a specific political climate. They had a specific climate in itself. And then throughout time, that changed. Some changed incrementally. Some changed drastically. Just like the advent of technology, which we see
Yep.
that's at the brink of millennials and post-millennials, which is Generation Z. That in itself changes the mindset, changes the way individuals think, changes the way individuals act. So our generation, millennials, I'm asking, what is the greatest problem what is coherent? That problem,
Yeah.
if there is a coherent problem
Yeah.
throughout our
Yeah.
generation, which is the millennial generation, what is that problem? Did you pinpoint it?
Yeah. For me, I don't know why I'm thinking back to college whenever I get questions like this. I was reading up, they made us do classes on getting a global perspective. And they talked about when you look at the eastern side of the continent, like India and these type of places, they are very focused on tradition, right? So their cultures are very focused on the core beliefs and those specific traditions before they move outwards into superficial things.
Mm-hmm.
But here in the West, we're very focused first on superficial, and we can completely forget the core. And I think that kind of sums up the main millennial issue, where we are so wrapped up on the surface activities and the surface wants
Exactly
that we
right.
do not focus on the core. And no matter how you look at it, all the issues come from that, right? So you're talking about and there's so many factors that kind of play into this, but I can just use one as an example. I mean, social media, right? When you see the pictures of what people want you to see of their lives and you think that this is their life and this is their success, you can't help but now feel like you need to compare. Like, my friend just bought a house, why don't I have a house? You know, I feel jealous. Am I not adequate enough? Right? You're still focusing a lot on what you see on the surface, but we got to this point where we forgot that a person's profile is not their actual life. It's not their persona, right? We are all human. We all have our ups and downs, or problems, or goods, but you can't compare the two. And we're not realizing that this is a very superficial issue that we're facing, and not focusing on the core of, like, okay, well, who am I as a person? What is my vision? What is my life? What are my steps to get there? We kind of shy away from that because there's too many distractions, too many shiny things around that's kind of distracting us from the fact that, hey, maybe our life isn't where we want it to be. So let me go and scroll on the endless timeline to distract myself. Let me jump into some kind of social media beef, Twitter beef while that's happening. Let me jump into a game. Let me lose myself on a Netflix binge. And there's a lot of things that can distract us from what I would say is the core. Because when people get to the core, that's when they really start figuring out, well, what should I be doing?
And I appreciate that analysis. And I'm going to ask that, since and I agree with that. I totally agree with that. I will not argue that for a second. And the problem is that our culture and our belief system as Westerners, which we are, it has shifted, because it wasn't like that in the past. I think we have enough data to go back and to look at how, because we were rich in culture, especially in the Caribbean. We were rich in culture, and our culture is based on our belief system. That's what gives rise to your culture. The way that you believe, is what you believe, the way you act, the way you speak, even it's your belief, what we believe, and our belief was heavily based on a higher power, on a higher value. So it wasn't the external aspects. It wasn't just what we see on the outside. We used to live in a pathway that was different than what we live in now. Right now, we are living outside in, but in the past, we used to live inside out. Our values was very important to us. Our belief system gone. Those things were very important to us. Now we focus so much on, like you said, your persona. You focus so much on your ego. You focus so much on the fleeting things. Like, what Sigmund Freud, that psychologist Sigmund Freud, called it the will to pleasure. We are motivated to do things that are pleasuring to us in the current moment, and we don't know anymore how to sacrifice the current moment, sacrifice what we want in the now, so that we could bargain with the future. And that's one of the most interesting things that we have discovered as human beings, the ability to bargain with the future. But now we are unable to do that, because instant gratification, which is perpetuated by even technology. The data is clear on that. Technology is making everything so instant. You see everything so instant. So now you are unable to have a goal, like writing your book, and write your book for a long period of time with the end in mind. Like my favorite author, Stephen Covey, said, if you go to pursue an aim, you need to have an end in mind. And that end in mind creates a value structure for you. And that value structure is going to judge you as an individual. So if you are not following that value structure, the aim that is this value structure is built on defines how you should behave, who you should be, and how your life should be. And a lot of us millennials, we don't, and I was down that path as well. A lot of us millennials, we don't have a specified aim, because we know having or specifying an aim becomes a judge. A perfect example. If I want to
Yeah.
be an author, what are the things that authors do? Those are the things that I should do. So if I fall out of that, then I'm going to say, okay, I am not working on becoming an author anymore. So it's self-judging the fact that you have an aim. So persons think like if they don't have an aim, they will not fail because there's nothing to compare themselves against. There's nothing
Hmm.
to hold accountable to. So that's one of the
Yeah.
things that, and I find that's very interesting. So I'm saying if we can go so deep on the problem, if you can specify the problem that way, what do you think is causing that mindset shift? The shift in the way that we interpret the world. We used to interpret the world inside out. Now we are
Yeah.
interpreting the world outside in. Is that a deliberate act or is it a consequence of our environment?
Yeah.
This is a question I'm asking myself.
Yeah, I think it's just growth, right? We're at this very weird precipice of change where I think the millennial generation is the one that's going to have to kind of garner that change and kind of make the way forward for the generation before us, the Zoomers, because it's definitely technology based, right? I think back to how much access we have and what comes with that access and the growth that comes with that access. There's good and there's bad. So you come with the onset of social media, there's so much positives. I can run my whole business on a social media platform. I can get access to people through their DMs and I'm nowhere near them, right? You have a lot of useful tools with it, but then you also now have the negative side where you're just bombarded with information. It's overload level to the point where now you have issues connecting with yourself because there's just too much information coming in. And you become so accustomed to this information overload that it just feels like a norm, right? We go to the bathroom with these in our hands, not even realizing that it's hard for us to have a moment where we're not doing something, we're not transmitting something, right? And these have, real world applications that are affecting us in different ways. So I mean, I talk about social media a lot, but you talk about, so there's something I have that's called push-pull factors within a book that talk about, so how we were conditioned as kids, it was mainly something called push factors, where we only react when we are pushed. There's some kind of external factor that is so large that it's kind of forcing us into a direction. So you have exams, you have to go and study. You have assignments, you need to go and study. You have something coming up, you're being told to go do it. But then you finish school, you're now an adult, and you have more freedom to choose. But it's difficult now to choose because you're not accustomed to creating structure for yourself. You're accustomed for structure being created for you.
Exactly.
So now you will only react when you have similar stimuli. So what are the new push factors now that are going to force you to do work? You're like, I need to pay some bills. My parents kicked me out. I need to get a job. You've been pushed in that direction. You don't necessarily want that particular job, but you need money. So you do it. You're commuting to your job. It's painful. It's taking forever. You say, oh, push factor, buy a car. You keep being pushed until you get to this point where you don't even know how you got to this point in your life. And that's a conditional problem. It's not necessarily our fault, although it is within your power. You have to be the one to snap out of it. And I talk about having pull factors where you pause, you take a minute and you say, what are the things that I want to attract in my life? And I ask grown adults this question and they almost watch me in this quizzical way, like, I'm allowed to think of something that I want specifically and bring it to myself. I was like, yeah, but this is what life is all about. You deciding how you want your life to look like, what you want it to be like, and then aiming for that. But we're so much in this state of reacting that it's just very strange and uncomfortable and different to think that I should be more intentional about my life. We do it for some areas. Again, it might still even be a push factor there because we've been forced to.
You're right. It's a push factor.
Yeah. Yeah. So we think we are, but we're not really. And if you are really intentional about your life, you think about, well, how do I want to live? What do I want my days to look like? What is the amount of money I want to work for? What type of family do I want to have? How do I want to aim for that? Me, spiritual wise, where do I want to be there? What is my education level supposed to be like? Am I reading? These are the questions you need to ask and answer to now sculpt a future where you can say, that is exactly what I see myself being when I'm 10 years from now, 20 years from now. But you can't achieve these things by just going on this cascade of accident, reaction, things just happening. And I think that's one of the major things that we have to figure out. Like bursting the bubble, and that's what I always call it, bursting the bubble and saying, hey, wake up to the fact that this is your life and you take control, because right now you are like a leaf on a river. Wherever the tide takes you, you're being pulled in that direction. You need to be on like a boat and rowing to a particular direction that you want to go to.
I'm listening to you speak, and I'm asking myself what is going on. I'm asking myself because this is exactly the problem that I'm trying to solve. And the way I ask exactly what you're saying, exactly because I listen to you properly, it's not far from my life aim, what I'm using my life to do fundamentally. My aim in life is to try my best to solve what is coined as existential crisis. Existential crisis is, I learned that term from Viktor Frankl by reading the book Man's Search for Meaning. And one of the things that he said that really stuck with me was that between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our ability to choose our response. In our response lies our power and our freedom. Fundamentally, he was saying that existential crisis is basically human beings living a meaningless life. And he was the father of logotherapy. He's trying to give persons meaning in life. And I find it very fascinating because I didn't open the book and read the book and just conceptualize what he was saying. I was living the meaningless life before I read the book. So, like you said, what you want your book to do, what you want from your book. I honestly thought he was in my head because everything that was happening around me. That's exactly what he explained, and that's what you were explaining. You just on a leaf floating down the river, and whatever comes, and majority of the time, it's your basic needs, your basic drives, your ID, what Sigmund Freud called your ID, your instinctual drive. That's what pulls you. So you're not above your instinctual drives. You pulled by your human instincts. But as human beings, we have consciousness. We are higher than just our instinctual drives. We can't take control, or we can't guide our instinctual drives if we have enough awareness. And that's my message in my book, Purpose Driven. The title is Purpose Driven, but the subtitle is The Meaning of Life is Found in the Purpose to Live. Because existential crisis brings forth existential tirade. And existential tirade has the three different characteristics of living a meaningless life. It's depression, addiction, and aggression. And a vast majority of our young people, you could say, or millennials, or persons that are living meaningless lives, no matter what generation they are in, they suffer with either one or all three of those things. A lot of our major problem right now in society is depression. A lot of persons are depressed. Why would I say that? Do I have the statistical data to represent that? Yes, it's there. A lot of us are addicted. Because addiction is not, the people are not addicted to the alcohol and the drugs. That's not what they're addicted to. They are addicted to the escape.
Yeah.
When you take the drug, when you take the alcohol and all those things, that's the escape it creates. It creates an escape. It gives you some level of confidence that your life is not meaningless. But then when it subsides, you go back in the bottomless pit. You go back to hell, so to speak. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to say. Not on a religious, and it's not that I want the message to fall on as a religious message, because when you involve in human behavior, when you involve in human development on that level of analysis, it always comes across as something religious fundamentalism. It always comes across as that. But I'm saying, no. Let's look at this thing objectively. There's something wrong with us fundamentally. not moving myself in it. Something wrong with us. And it takes a day-to-day fight to stay above. But then what would you say to somebody who doesn't even know that there's the way that the frame of reference or the implicit bias towards life is not one is not one that is aligned properly to how a human being should be, because there is a way a human being should be. There is objective principles. I believe in objective principles. I believe in truth. No matter if our system or if the way that we go about life now is that life is subjective. It's only based on our experiences. That's partly right. That's partly right. It's based on our different experiences. But there is always an ideal. If there is no ideal, then why do we have laws? The law is to keep you in to keep you in a specific ideal. There is a way that you should be as a human being, and there are, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's one of the things that I was trying to discuss. I'm trying to discuss, like, there are principles that guide life. Just like a plant, you put a plant in the soil. You put a seed in the soil. You must give the seed water. That's a principle. Yeah. Your belief system have nothing to do with that. You can leave the seed outside on the concrete floor and believe it could grow all you want. It will not grow. Your belief system have nothing to do with objective principles. Just like gravity. You can go above a building and jump down and believe you can fly. That's in your head, but the pull down is principle. You are going down. So I'm trying to find whether or not, or the different principles that guide our mind, or that guide our behavior, that guide us as human beings. And one of them I came across was being driven with a purpose, having an aim. That's a principle. It's not based on your belief. If you have an aim and you genuinely have an aim, you will move from one point to the next. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about you speaking about millennials. Because back then, and a lot of people could say that, back then, the baby boomers, it was very interesting how by the age of 25, they were probably settled, married, and all those things.
Home, car, stable job is lovely for them.
So but we can argue, and I'm making a case for the millennials. We can argue that the economic structures were different back then. We can argue that things were not as expensive back then. We can argue that life was different. Now, one of the things that I'm saying, and I read this quote, it's a wonderful quote. It says, strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. And hard times create strong men. So basically, if we find hard times, because we had the strong men created good times back then, and we have hard times, I think we need to pick up our responsibility. Notice that the time and the environment is the way it is right now. What can we do to improve it? How can we look at being? How can we look at existence the way it is right now? Not only complaining about the problem. Yes, we have complained about the problem for a long time. We complain and we sit home in our basement doing nothing. Yes, there is a problem. How can you use your creativity? How can you use your mind to make the problem, to solve a little bit of the problem while you are alive? That's an interesting.
That's what I was talking about, where I said that we are in a very unique position where we now have to garner the way forward for the next generation, because we have it hard, but it also means that we can exact change. So that looks like, generations before passing on the power to us, because we are getting to that age now where we are supposed to be picking up the slack. And that same innovation that was causing a lot of friction that we bring, because, we always have all the questions. Why we do things this way? Why is this done this way? Right? We can now start changing things for the better. Of course, we will make our mistakes, but the whole purpose of this is that it's supposed to be dynamic. And you're right. I mean, we had a lot to complain about. There's a lot stacked against us. But again, just as what you had said, weak men create a tough environment for us. The tough environment will make us strong, forcing us to create innovative solutions to something that is just difficult. So when we now create these solutions, it's only going to help the ones that come after us. And I see it more as a challenge, because Yes, it may not, what we are experiencing right now may not be exactly what we want. It's hard to get a house. We're all educated. Jobs are hard to find. Everybody's becoming an entrepreneur. COVID, we want to own a home. It's a lot. But if we could get past the distractions, get past the complaint, and start asking the proper questions of, for one, what can we do to change things? What is the next step? You'll be surprised at the amazing ideas and innovations that we come up with. And I'm really looking forward to see that, because there's a lot to fix and there's a lot of us struggling, but I'm sure there's a lot of solutions within there that are going to pop up that's going to change you for sure. There's no doubt in my mind about that, especially.
Yeah, exactly. And while you were speaking, I remember reading a book called The Psychology of Intelligence by Jean Piaget. He's a world-renowned psychologist, but he was he was not really interested in psychology. He's called a psychologist. And one of the things that he wrote in that book is like, the true mark of intelligence is the ability to adapt. That's the true mark of intelligence, the ability to be in a situation, because deep down to your biochemical level, you are adaptive. Deep down, as a biology major, you understand how our cells, based on our external aspect, how it reacts and it changes, so that the survival of the organism is main priority.
Right.
And that's important. The true mark of intelligence is the ability to adapt in a way that you survive and your surroundings survives. And that's how I think about it. So me thinking about your book, Millennial Experience and the Millennial Mind, one of the questions I would like to ask you is that, do you think that the philosophy that guides life, or the philosophy that guides life back then, is there a different philosophy based on the different generations? Is there a different way that we choose to think of life based on our box, because of where we are? Because philosophy is what guides your mind. Your mind, the way you think. Philosophy is how you see life, how you think about life. So is there a different, and everything is based on your philosophy of education, the philosophy of politics, the philosophy of money, the philosophy of all those things. Do you think there is a shift in the way that we think about life?
Definitely. I think a lot of it, to me, is based on experiences. And I think a lot of us have the similar experience of, we were told to expect something once we entered into the real world. We were told that you get the education, you'll get the life. And what a lot of us were met with were that we got the education, but everybody was educated, so we didn't get the life. We got a struggle, right? And I think the natural inclination to being met with this, is to question things. If I was told X, Y, and Z, and none of this was the case, then we are now that generation to question everything. Why should I do this way? Why should I live my life this way? Why should I even work? Why shouldn't I be an entrepreneur, right? We have no choice to question these things, because we did not get what we were expecting. And I mean, again, I'm not trying to hit boomers or the generation above the boomers. For them, it worked, right? I mean, they're coming from a time where not everybody was educated. And when you had that one job, you stayed in that job for 30 years, you had that pension, life was set. That is not the case for us. Everybody has a degree. A lot of people have masters. We don't stay in the same job, because if the job doesn't align with our purpose, if we feel like it's just our job, most of us don't want to stay in it, even past whatever particular responsibilities we have. We want to live outside of a particular trap. And when you're met with all these things, you now have to start thinking about, well, what is life supposed to really mean? Which might maybe be an indication of why you see a lot of more liberal thinking on the side of millennials, by being more open to having conversations about mental health.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. That's an interesting gateway. That's an interesting gateway. The fact that the liberal thinking, of millennials. Are you familiar? Are you familiar with the liberal philosophy, the philosophy
What's that?
of liberalism?
Well, I mean, I know what liberalism is, and I'm not sure if what you're speaking about is something different, but I feel like
Yes,
it's probably going to be in the same vein.
you could go ahead. Tell me what you think about. Tell me what it is. Liberalism.
I think it's just not living within particular confines, understanding that everything is kind of fluid. It's not it's not just set. You are allowed to kind of question it, and you're allowed to think outside the confines of what is presented to you.
Basically, and
Yeah.
so, and that's my position on that. Like, that's my position. So, to basically, liberalism is saying that, like you said, everything is fluid, everything is subjective. So,
Yeah.
even gender is subjective. A lot of those things are subjective. A lot of things are subjective, and that's the climate of our world right now. So,
yeah.
When you talk about everything being subjective or a lot of things being subjective, there is almost like you are ripping off the substructure of existence, because there are specific things, there are specific, I'm not going to say morals, but there are specific ways of being in the world that is not mandatory, but
it's just the norm. Yeah, it's the norm.
It is required for life to move forward. If life is stumbling forward, it is still moving forward. And the liberal thinking tends to me, and that's one of the things that when I read Friedrich Nietzsche, when he made a claim, and I'm very interested in that claim, reading one of his books, he said, God is dead and we have killed him. And basically what he was saying, and persons tend to misunderstand that, what he was saying is that the moral substructure that held existence together, we have now ripped it apart. So everybody can behave in whatever way they can. And he predicted that there will be a lot of bloodshed in the world because of that moral substructure which is removed. And 50 years after he died, World War I was a result of moving the moral structure of existence. Because think about it. Let's think about it a little while. If you create many groups, right? Many groups, everybody have a say, and you create this group over there, you create that group over there. Nothing is true. If nothing is true, what you have is chaos. There's two ways of being in the world. We live in a binary existence. There's two ways of being. It's either existence is ordered or existence is chaotic. So if everything is subjective and everybody can believe what they want without objective truth, you create an existence where persons can question even the law itself. Persons can create whatever belief they want, like the Nazis created whatever belief Hitler had in his mind, that his race was a superior race, and nobody, because that's his belief. If everything is subjective and everything is left to question, nobody shouldn't question whether or not what Hitler did was wrong. You cannot, because wrong, there's no such thing as wrong. So you cannot say killing 10 million people is wrong. Then what's wrong? If everything is to be questioned, then what is right and what is wrong? The question of moral and ethic tend to be thin. So that's one of the things that I find, as much as I'm questioning a lot of what happened in my distrust of the system, because I'm a millennial, and like you said, majority of what was promised to me, I'm a teacher, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and majority of what's promised to me, it's like a father telling a son, clean the yard. When you clean the yard, when you get home, I will give you $10. And you clean the yard as best as you can, and when you get home, your father isn't even there. So you create distrust. Your father create distrust inside of your mind, and then you now have a lot of resentment. You have a lot of resentment now. So I can understand why we are moving towards a more liberal thinking, to be able to question everything, because nothing is true. There's no truth. Truth is subjective. There's a reason why we think that way. And I was down that line. Then you have to stop, and you have to wheel in and said, am I throwing the baby outside with the bathwater? Am I throwing truth out because, am I saying that my mother is bad, my brothers are bad, I hate my auntie, I hate my uncle because my father betrayed me?
But I mean, it's almost as though you clean the yard and you came home and you didn't get the money. Your father wasn't there, but then everybody's telling you you're horrible. Because that's what it's like to be a millennial, because everybody blames us for the way we are, the things that we do, when we're also like, but wait, I just did all this work, got no payment, and everybody's telling me I am like this horrible person. So it's understandable, the complacency, it's understandable, the almost impetuous attitude towards things. But it's like we're like forced to be the bigger person generation. Because if we hold fast with the resentment, it's just going to be to the destruction of everybody. Because when the power is inevitably past us, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to guide it by resentment? Because if we do, we'll basically just be causing more issues, similar to like we got to the generation coming up. And is that what we really want to do? Do we want to become the dictators that would just like it's really a question of what are we going to do when we are now when the baton is passed to us? And it's a big question.
It's a big question.
And COVID is not helping.
That's a whole other topic. But my question to you now, we were broad, and let me zone it down to the Caribbean. How do you think that this behavior, because in the Caribbean context, we and that's one of the things I'm thinking about. I was reading this book, Stuart Hall. I don't know if you know Stuart Hall. He was a Jamaican intellectual. He went to study in England and all those things. And his main theme in that book was talking about the Caribbean identity. My first question is, do we have a Caribbean identity? And what would our Caribbean identity look like? And is it changing because of globalization? Is it changing because your identity is highly based on your culture, and your culture, you agreed, is based on your belief system. And we, as our majority of the race we have in the Caribbean, we have a very strong spiritual life, and we believe deeply in transcendental God, and that belief is deep within our Judeo-Christian ethic. And I'm saying, is that, are we going to lose something so, are we going to lose something so precious to us, losing the word precious, because in the Caribbean, because of the current state of the world and what's happening right now?
I mean, I don't want to sound kind of general with this, but it kind of almost feels inevitable, because when you look at the state of things now, we're not really connected to the core. We're not really connected as much as the generations before. When you say with culture, because of the online culture of being able to see everything and know everything. I mean, we speak in Trinidad, we talk about us picking up the trends of Americans as soon as they happen, kind of thing. And it's true, because I see it all the time. And I think that's only going to escalate unless we create some kind of Caribbean identity to be proud of. I remember when Olympics was going on, you look at other countries' pride towards their athletes, and it's just on another level. And then I look at ours, I'm just like, it's not the same level of intensity, right? And then we wonder why they don't do well. It's because we're not all rallying behind one unified Caribbean identity, or even if you're talking about just Trinidad and Tobago identity, because it seems like there are sects in different parts of it, and now they're all in the same sphere, but they're not all connected. I mean, it might just be the result of globalization. I don't think it's something you can really stop, because once you have that access, you can't change that. The generation below us, they're basically born with a Kindle in their hand. At least I still know what dial-up sounds like. I still had to deal with all of that. I didn't have Wi-Fi everywhere growing up. So if my generation or our generation is like that now, what do you say for the generation below us who has even more access, who's even more plugged in, right? There will be a divergence, but I mean, it could also mean that there's a creation of a new kind of melting pot culture. And I mean, that's really how culture is created. The culture that we see as the old culture was new at some point in time. So it's not far-fetched for something new to be created. And of course, when new comes, there's always going to be friction and turbulence. That's just my idea on that. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think you are describing exactly what is happening. And like David Young, philosopher, he said, there's a difference between the is and the ought. You were speaking about the is, and that's great. That's what that is was happening. But my idea is, to me, what ought to happen is a form of pushback saying, hey, there are some things that are valuable to me as an individual, and not even as an individual, as a collective, but then it's based on individuals in that collective. But like you rightly said, if individuals in that collective is beginning to change one at a time, accepting what's coming in without bringing anything out, then there's a high possibility like we're going to have a melting pot culture, like you say. And that's exactly what globalization is. That's exactly what the global community is. And I'm interested in thinking about those things. Our education system as a people, as Caribbean people, and that's not me trying to be critical. I'm not trying to criticize it, but I'm saying we should, if that's what it's going to be fundamentally, do you think the way that we're educated in the primary schools, the secondary schools, and even our university is building us to compete on the global scale? Because it's going to be that inevitably. Are we going to be, because there is social stratification, right? And you have different classes. So I don't know how it will be in the global village. If you're going to have two classes, top class and working class, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, or if they're going to be different working classes. So I'm saying, are we at a place right now in the Caribbean to compete or to even compare ourselves based on our education levels with the persons on the outside? Let's say Russia, let's say Germany, let's say China, let's say Asia.
I think it's also a little bit subjective because it's what you take stock as important for education in the actual word education. For me, I see many gaps. I feel like we're pushing out a lot of drones. We're just fully focused on getting educated persons who can work in jobs, right? But I think we're missing a whole sector of life that is important to actually be a functional adult, right? How can we still be using probably 80% of the same structure that my parents were using? That to me, and that's insane.
That's a problem.
That's insane.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
How could 30, 40, 50 years pass and very little has changed? You're now seeing these people coming out and they don't know how to be adults. I have people who, same school as me, same grades, and they don't know how to do a budget right now. Their family is falling apart because they can't lead this family, they can't keep it together. You know, as somebody who studied abroad, I also see the other side of it, where we don't have as many resources here. So when I went to college away, where the resources were just endless, I was able to flourish, right? But I can't even get to that point because to me, fundamentally, there's too much that's broken. We should be learning more about mental health. We should be learning more about ourselves. We should be learning about how to be an adult in the simplest forms. But even if we talk about personal development, why do I not know how to do taxes when I leave school? This is like fundamental things. It's almost saying that it is more important that you get these A's so that you can prove that you can get a job, because that is what's most important to your survival. But then you see the onset and the rise of mental health issues because when we're missing something fundamentally that can help individuals survive. And I'm just wondering when the schooling system is going to realize that this is becoming a huge problem, right? My second book, I wasn't even intentional, but it had to be a lot of these stories, because that second book, The Millennial Experience, is made based on the stories of hope, growth, and success. A lot of them had to do with mental health. And I write based on what I see, what is happening around me, the norm, and what I want to shock people into to seeing. And I was just appalled at how many mental health issues are just arising and increasing. And we're almost getting to this point of numbed it. And it's almost saying we need to wake up to the where we're at right now, but then also say what we need to, like, what is the change that's going to come from this? Because we can't keep doing what we've been doing because it's producing the problems that we have today, but yet you're not seeing any signals of the changes. So then the question is, what are we going to do to make the change? I get real frustrated with school stuff because I just find that we focus on wholly too much of the wrong things. I get asked to talk in schools and I want to talk about real life, and they always whisper in my ear, hey, just make sure I motivate them to do well in exams. And I'm like, but let's be real. None of this matters. Like, your grades are important, yes, but school is not going to be the be all and end all of your life after you leave. I did a whole biology degree. I was going to be a doctor. I am not doing anything close to that right now. My life is just fine. But we're scaring them to tell them, you need to know what you need to do right now. You need to do well in this. If you don't, your life is over. And that's what a lot of kids are experiencing, if they even get to that level, because the ones who don't do well enough are just more or less discarded and said, well, survive. And this can't be the system that we're expecting to continue forever. You know? The school thing is always an issue for me.
Yeah, one of the things that, and Sunday I am doing an online Zoom lecture on the difference between education and propaganda. And the reason why I'm doing that, I really want to speak about education. I want to speak about the history of it. I want to have an objective definition of what education really is. And my conception based on research is that education is the ability to think and to think critically. All right? Not propaganda is telling people what to think. And it was Mark Twain who said,
I like that.
don't let schooling interfere with your education. And sometimes you watch persons with success stories and you might be like, oh, but he didn't go to school. Why is he hiring somebody with a PhD degree? No. This man can think. Thinking. Writing helps you to think. And thinking is very important. We have not been educated and cultured in a way to think.
Yeah.
We just react. Stimulus, response. There's no space. Stimulus, response. And that's what David Wiggins called. He's a philosopher that called that and being animalistic. Is basically saying you just respond. You have no way to stop and decide and to make variable changes. You're not even cultured. You're not even civilized, because civilization fundamentally is the management of the intelligent management of human emotion. You are unable to think. You are unable to stop and say, okay, how am I going to react in this situation? Okay, what is going on? X is the problem. What is the problem? Specify the problem. Cut the problem in pieces. Fix the first piece that's supposed to be fixed, and the second piece align the problem. Are we able to think that way? Because our education system, and I'm a teacher, and that's not me being a harsh critic. That's just me describing what I'm seeing as a teacher. And I had an interesting encounter when I entered teachers college. I was almost thrown out of teachers college. I was almost thrown out because I believe in the work of Jean Piaget when he said constructivist, the philosophy of education that he holds is to be a constructivist. He said the learner is able to construct the knowledge. The learner must be involved in constructing the knowledge, and teachers have to be the persons guiding. The teacher is not the person pushing the information in the learner's head. The learner constructs, help the learner to construct. Now, how do you help learners to construct knowledge? By asking critical questions. And probably that's why we are unable to take that path. Asking questions that would generate thinking takes time. It takes time. And the experience was that I was so focused on that and so focused on that philosophy of education. I had lesson plans and things like that and put in place. But to me, what I was trying to do, I was trying to come across differently, but then I was not grounded too much in my content. And that's a fundamental mistake. And I made a mistake there, and I was like, while I'm trying to make a change, which I understand why persons don't take that route, because that route, you must have passion to take that route. Because here am I making a mistake on my practical exam, because I wanted to come across as something different. I wanted to come across as taking the hard road and passing with that hard road, because that's the philosophy of education I believe in. And
Right.
I didn't want to look, I didn't want to not be myself. I always like to be myself where I go. If I speak my truth in that moment, that's what's true to me. I'm going to speak it. And if it's wrong, and if we can have this conversation, and if you can fix what my perceptions are, that's a plus.
Mm-hmm.
Because my perceptions is not always correct, and that's how I write. That's how I read. Everything I write or everything I read, I always read it from the framework that this idea is not fully formed, or it might
Mm-hmm.
not be true. I don't hold things. I have a little subjectivity in my yes. Subjectivity lives under personal unconscious. You have your personal unconscious, I'm talking about Carl Jung. You have a personal unconscious and you have your collective unconscious. Your personal experience tends to be differs from somebody else's personal experience. But then there's something, all experiences in one, it then have an aim, like I said before. So I always look at things in a way that it could be improved, and I can participate in its improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I made the mistake.
Okay, I see. Very, very interesting. I'm not gonna lie.
So we were here for we agreed to speak for 45 minutes, but it's now an hour, and I think we could go for days.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to allow you to say a bit to the persons who are listening to us right now, and then
Yeah.
we're going to end from there.
I mean, for those who are listening, I mean, it's really about boosting your bubble if you think you are in one. I like to tell persons, especially clients, that if you feel like you are that leaf on that stream, just going where the current takes you. It means that you're living your life in a kind of a default setting. Just ask yourself, what is it that you want from life? How do you want your life to be? Don't hold yourself to the confines of what your reality or what your box is telling you. Really think about what you want and then use that as a guiding beacon to create it, because the only difference between what you're doing now and what you should be doing is just being a little bit more intentional with your thoughts and with your actions. But it starts with you, saying, well, what do I want? And then putting in the work to be more intentional. It will be hard, but over time you'll get used to that and it'll just become second nature to you. But it will affect your whole life positively.
All right. So that was a great message. Well,
Thanks.
I really enjoyed speaking with you.
Same here.
I wish you success on your book.
You as well.
2 books, and I know you're young, and we will be expecting more from you. All right?
Yeah, I have a lot coming.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
So thanks for having me.
Yeah.